On this episode of Take This Down, I sit down with Fort Worth Police Chief Neil Noakes, and we talk about his upbringing growing up outside of Weatherford and how faith, family, and friends was the core of his upbringing, how he strives every day to get 1% better. You're going to want to take this down. You're going to want to take this down. Thank you all for tuning in to Take This Down with Ty Stimpson. It's a privilege and an honor to sit down today with Chief of Police Neil Noakes with the Fort Worth Police Department. Looking forward to this conversation. You know, one thing I always tell my guests before we get started is, why I invited them on this show. When I was sitting down, thought of this concept, I made a list of individuals that I would love to have a conversation with them. And, although, you and I know each other outside of this space, but, I would say there's still a lot that, I think I would love to learn, but also the general public would love to learn about you outside of the badge. And so, I know you're a busy man keeping us all safe. So thank you for taking the time and sitting down and having this conversation with me.
Hey, it's my pleasure, brother. Not only respect you professionally, but personally as well. Grown to love you and your family, and it's an honor anytime I can sit down and have a conversation with you.
So let's kind of jump into it. So who is Neil Noakes at his core?
What I like to think about whenever I think about what drives me and how I make decisions and what my life has crafted me to be is three words: faith, family, and friends. And I try to structure my life around those things in that order. My faith has always been a very powerful part of my life, something that in my core drives what I do. And I've been at various places in my life where I did let my faith really lead me, and when I didn't, very close second is my family. And that goes back to when I was a child growing up in an amazing family. My parents were absolutely incredible people, still are to this day. I had two sisters, one older and one younger. And then my friends, the people like you, the people that are also around me. I say all the time, I'm not special. People ask me how I became the chief of police. And most days I still can't believe I am. Still kind of feels a little surreal. And it's only been because of the grace and blessings of God and the people he's put around me, those family and friends, that have allowed me to be here where I am. So I'm a product of God's grace and blessings and a product of the people who've poured into me my entire life.
That's good. That's good. So talk a little bit about, growing up. Did you grow up in Fort Worth?
I was born in Fort Worth, Harris Methodist. So this is where I started my life, in Fort Worth. Grew up just outside of Weatherford, again, with my parents, my two sisters. Went to school in a small town, but had a great upbringing, really did. We didn't have much, man. We were so broke we couldn't pay attention, right? My dad was a firefighter in a small town, so didn't make a lot of money, did a lot of construction on the side. My mom was a stay-at-home mom until we all went off to school. And then after that, she wanted to contribute financially as well. So she started cleaning houses. And I always put it this way: my parents always sacrificed for me, but I didn't see it when I was younger. My dad was working 60, 80 hours a week. And my mom was literally scrubbing other people's toilets to try to provide a better life for us. So I grew up with a heart for service. I try my best to be a servant leader, to put others first, to give back. And I can look back and see I got that from my parents.
Not a lot of people say they as kids or growing up, they already knew that they had a servant heart. That make you a lot of friends, or were people like, oh, that's the weird guy who always wants to help others out?
Hey, we're all a little weird in our own way, including me, right? I think it helped me more than hurt me. I was never a cliquish type of guy. Sure, I had maybe my closer friends, but I never tried to exclude anyone else. I was born with a healthy dose of empathy, and sometimes more than I wanted, because I always tried to look at the way I did things through the lens of how it affected others and how they would see it, how they would feel about it. And don't get me wrong, I've made so many mistakes over my life, and I've hurt people, I've been hurt by people. But I've tried my best to be accepting of others. I've tried myself to make others feel welcome and valued when I can. I'm sure I fail at it more than I realize. But I think when a person has that eye for others, putting themselves second, third, fourth, whatever it is, and trying to think of others first, I think it's a positive for everybody. Again, I'm not saying I'm perfect and I do it all the time, but I try. That's a focus for me.
Growing up, would you say your parents were like your role models or heroes, or was there, an extended family member or a coach or teacher that also have made a large impact in your upbringing?
Absolutely. My parents were role models. There's no question. My dad, probably the hardest working man I've ever seen in my life. My mother, the most giving person I've ever seen in my life, never put herself first in any situation that I saw. I read a quote one time. It said, a mother is someone who, when they see there's only 4 pieces of pie left for 5 people, promptly announces, well, I never did like pie anyway. Mm-hmm. They will go without just to make sure everyone else is taken care of. I remember one time we were at church. My dad, being a firefighter, would be gone 24 hours and he'd be home for 48 when he worked his other jobs. So one Sunday morning we get up, we go to church with my mom, and we were begging her to take us to Brahms afterwards. And she didn't have the money, but we wouldn't stop. We were being bratty little kids. So she finally took us. We're sitting there at the counter and she orders the least amount possible and absolutely nothing for herself, and is having to count out change to pay for it. And we sit down, and I know she is just as starving as we are, but she made sure we had what we needed, and she completely went without and never complained once. And I didn't see it as a child, what she was doing. And I don't know how many times she did that over our lives, doing without to make sure we had what we needed. If that's not a role model, I don't know what is. Another one in my family was my maternal grandfather, and he was an incredible guy. He was a teacher, a coach, and a superintendent later in his career, a small business owner, a man that just commanded respect when he walked into a room, but not because he was overbearing. Sure, he was confident, but he wasn't cocky, but it's the way he treated other people. People were automatically drawn to him, automatically engaged with him. And I learned very early on the value of developing relationships like he did with other people. So really all of my role models have been people in my family that I was closest to.
And so it sounds like a lot of people, you come from a family who lead with their heart, and
Yes.
then everything else kind of falls into place.
And I've got to mention my maternal grandmother as well. One of the sweetest, most patient, yet very humbly confident, if I can put it that way, people I've ever known, who did nothing but take care of people her entire life. Even one of her own daughters, my aunt, my mother's oldest sister, when she died of Lou Gehrig's disease, she was the one there taking care of her as her daughter just wasted away. Oh. Just holding her hand as she died even. And she did that for her parents. She did that for her husband, my grandfather's parents. Spent her whole life taking care of people. Even her husband, as he was dying, she was there with him the entire time. I will never measure up to what my family is, but I try to take as much as I can from them and do the best that I can.
Wow, that's good. That's good. So having that instilled in you, when you finished high school, you was ready to take on the world, I imagine. You had it all figured out, right?
I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was totally lost. I started going to Weatherford College because I didn't know how scholarships worked. My dad actually went to Weatherford College for like a semester or two, but he never finished his education. I had aunts, uncles, and my grandfather who were highly educated, but my immediate family just wasn't a thing. I'm the first in my family to have a degree. Didn't know where I wanted to go. I had no idea what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I knew I wanted to help. I wanted to serve somehow. So I went to college, and 7 years later, I had an associate's degree in general studies. That's how focused I was. It took me 7 years to get a 2-year degree, and it was in general studies. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I worked various jobs. I worked some in construction. I'd seen my dad do that, so I worked some jobs in construction. Eventually got a job working security at federal facilities in the Metroplex. And eventually I thought, you know what, I've got to do something. These jobs are going nowhere. There's no retirement, no health benefits, no future. And I started talking to a lot of people who were in policing. I thought, maybe I should give that a try. My dad was a firefighter, but I don't like ladders, man. I don't like heights. I wouldn't go in that way. I thought, let me give this a shot, because everybody made it feel like I could really give back and do something positive. And I talked to a lot of people in the Metroplex. I didn't want to move away. I wanted to stay somewhere here fairly local. And I talked to a buddy of mine, and he said, if you want to work in the Metroplex in policing, Fort Worth is the best of the best of the best. And as soon as I heard that, I said, okay, it's Fort Worth and nothing. So went through the process, I got hired, and it's been an amazing career. There've been ups and downs, don't get me wrong. Everybody goes through burnout in policing at some point. Everybody comes home after some calls that you have to be exposed to and think, I really want to do this? But there's always that glimmer of hope when you actually help somebody. And they always say, don't come in thinking you're going to change the world. We all do. Right. I realized very early on I wasn't going to change the world, but maybe I can change a little piece of someone's world. So I had a maternal great-grandfather, and he will always tell his kids and his grandkids every day, try to help at least one person every single day. And so what I try to internalize is every day with my job, I had the opportunity to help multiple people, whether they took that help or not, whether it fell on deaf ears or they were able to receive and willing to receive that help and maybe change their lives even. I knew that I was at least doing my part. The rest is up to God. Changing people is not our job. That's God's job. Right. Our job is to love everyone and do what we can to help them get where they need to be.
Right. So you have a little bit of, I'm going to call it life and work experience before entering the police academy. You go through the police academy, you're a sworn now peace officer. You know what you're doing? Do you feel confident, or
absolutely
is it
not.
Eyes wide open?
Oh my gosh, deer in the headlights. So yeah, I was 26 when I started the academy, and that was an eye opener for me because I'd never served in the military, which is something now I kind of wish I did. It would have been some great experiences, another way to really give back. Anybody in the academy who'd been from the military, they understood what that kind of training is like. I had no clue. And there were times I thought, man, is this for me? Am I in the right place? But I just kept showing up every day. I said, just show up, just one more day. And it was such a fulfillment, a sense of accomplishment when I finished. It is no joke. The training is hard. The academics were harder than I anticipated. But when you're in an academic setting, you're learning in theory, and I would have to think as an attorney, you learn all this in law school, the day you graduate, oh, I'm good to go, I got this. Not necessarily, right?
Yeah, that real world kind of hits you in the face.
Exactly. It's one thing to understand it in theory and then to actually be able to do it in practice in real world situations. So one of the most important parts of our training, the academy training, is critical. But after that, we go into what's called field training, where we actually go out in the neighborhoods, ride with an officer who's certified to train us in a police car answering calls. And you go through months of training there where you're taking what you learned in the academy and actually putting it into practice. That's when things start to become real, because you learn about elements of the offense and how certain things are supposed to be structured. But when you actually have to go to a scene, complete chaos, people screaming, crying, yelling at each other, and you're having to get all the information you need to, one, determine if a crime has occurred, and then does an arrest need to be made? Is this something where I just need to make a report? Do we need to bring other resources? How are we going to help these people to make sure it doesn't happen again? That's a completely different scenario. And I don't care if you're a police officer for 100 years. Every day you have the opportunity to learn more and improve in your profession. So that's what I tried to do. 1% better every day. I'm not going to learn it all every single day, but every day I tried to get at least 1% better, because I want to be able to serve the best way I can. And there's always something more to learn.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And so you go come up the ranks in Fort Worth Police Department. You have various stops. Was there a particular assignment that you enjoyed the most, or was there an assignment that you was like, when am I going to get rotated?
Yes, both. Absolutely. When it comes to my favorite assignments, and I think most officers will say this, when I was a brand new officer, especially when I got cut loose from training, I'm on my own out there. It's maybe the scariest time, but I've heard a lot of officers say this. You come to work sometimes and think, I can't believe they pay me to do this. This is such an incredible job. That goes away after a while. You're looking for that paycheck every 2 weeks, don't get me wrong. But that was great. I remember when I first made sergeant, and because first I was an officer, did that for 8 years. I promoted to corporal and became a detective, and I was a detective for a few years. Then I promoted again to sergeant, and that's when I went back out into our neighborhood and communities and worked with the officers who were doing what I did when I first became a patrol officer. That was a great time. That's when I first really took on a leadership role, and I was able to work with officers, try to mentor, coach, and pour into them like I'd had people do for me when I was a new officer, and I was back out there in our communities serving. That was an amazing time. Also, while I was a sergeant, it was first patrol. Then I went to the DWI unit for a while. Then I went to what we call the motor unit, the motorcycle officers. That was a really impactful one for me because the training is like nothing I'd ever done. The things they teach us to do on those motorcycles, a fraction of a percent of the people in the world can do it. Not bragging, that's just a testament to the type of training we're doing. And it was hard. In the winter, it was freezing. In the summer, it was absolutely blisteringly hot. It wasn't always fun, but we trained together, we worked together. It was a true team. And I look back on that time, and that was one of my favorite times. After that, I became a lieutenant, had a couple of assignments. One of the ones that was hard was internal affairs. And as hard as it was, I knew it was absolutely necessary. We're people. We are held to a higher standard, and we should be. In the role as police officers, we should be held to a higher standard. But I think some people forget that we are people.
Right.
We are flawed people like everybody else. We make, bad decisions sometimes. We're put in the most dangerous, dynamic, complex situations that you can imagine and expected to make split-second decisions and be perfect every single time. It's never going to be perfect. We make it as good of an outcome as we possibly can, but sometimes you may make the wrong call in those situations. For me, what is more important is if anyone does anything, it's not a mistake of the head, it's a mistake of the heart. In other words, mistake of the head, maybe you misinterpreted something. Right. Your heart was in the right place, you just made a mistake. But if you know in your heart it's wrong and you do it anyway, that's a huge problem for me. If we want the community that we serve to trust us, call us when they need us, and have some respect for what we do, we have to be willing to hold ourselves accountable when we're wrong. And that's hard. I'm not going to lie. I don't just call it the Fort Worth Police Department. I call it the Fort Worth family. But just like your own family, if you don't hold one another accountable, then really bad things can happen. The idea is to catch things when they're small before they become something major. But that was a hard assignment for me. From there, I made commander. I was a commander over in far north when we built that brand new facility over there. That was a really good time. That was good training for later on becoming chief. After that, deputy chief, and eventually chief. And chief has been probably the best and most frustrating job ever. I know when people get a job, they maybe research it, try to find out what it's going to be like, go in with eyes wide open thinking, okay, I know what this is going to be like and I've got this. There is no way to know what it's like until you do it. I talked to my predecessor, Ed Krause, and he'd been not just an assistant chief, but the executive assistant chief, which is the number 2. He had been acting chief. He had actually at various times been the chief when the other chief, Fitzgerald, was maybe out of town for training. I skipped that assistant chief and went directly from deputy chief to chief, so I missed a lot of that. So I asked him one time, I said, I'm a little concerned about my learning curve. I said, I'm assuming for you it was like no big deal because you were right there. And he said, it's like night and day. Even for him, it was like night and day. And he said, until you sit in that seat, until you understand that pressure is 24/7, 365 and never goes away, you will never understand what it's like. And I thought he was just maybe trying to scare me. He was absolutely right. But it has been the honor of my professional career to be able to serve the department that I started in.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what did February 3rd, 2021 mean to you?
Wow. I think when we did the press conference within Mayor Price and the city manager, David Cook, and released it, I said, I think you're looking at the happiest man in Fort Worth right now. I was thrilled. I didn't know if I had a shot at it. I didn't know if I was going to be selected or not, but I thought, why not try? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? And I knew even if I wasn't selected, I would learn a lot from the process, and maybe down the road I could try again and get the job. When I found out, it was a sense of relief because the process was tough. It had a nationwide search, had some incredible candidates. So it was this amazing sense of relief, sense of accomplishment, but at the same time, it was like tempered with a dread because I really didn't know what I was getting into. And I don't like to disappoint people. I don't like to let people down. And one of the things you find out very quickly as a chief is every decision you make is going to upset someone. Doesn't matter what it is. No decision is perfect. You will never please all of them anytime. It just doesn't happen. And I had to learn to be okay with that. So what I had to internalize was that was going to be the case. I'd never make everyone happy. So I had to make sure I made the best possible decision I could with the information I had at the time and make sure it's coming from the right place. Not for my benefit, I'm not trying to get a job. I've got the job I want, not to impress anyone, but because I honestly believe it's the right thing. But here's the next thing you've got to be able to accept. I got to accept that I'm human. And as hard as I try, I can't guarantee everyone will be right. And someday I may look back on certain decisions and say, hey, I wish I'd done it a little bit differently. So those are the decisions that keep you up at night. And when you want the decisions to be perfect, I tend to be a perfectionist. You do that a lot because there is no such thing as a perfect decision.
No, but it also shows the growth and just kind of the humility to know that, hey, I may not always get it right, but I'm leading with the right intentions and
Right.
and big enough and humble enough to look back and say, no, maybe I could have did a better job then. So I think that's a testament to your character and who you are as a person.
Thank you.
So you come up the ranks, now you're the police chief. Looking back, from today to 20 years ago, are the challenges still the same in law enforcement? Are there new challenges that you are taking on now? It's not only a police department, but just law enforcement in general.
There's some, I think, universal truths with people that have stayed consistent throughout. It's one reason that we have job security in policing. I wish we didn't. I wish we weren't needed. I wish everybody would just do everything they should, treat everyone the way that they should, and we wouldn't even be a necessary part of society, but we are. Those kind of things have never changed, and they're not going to change in my lifetime. But it's a very dynamic field of work. There are always going to be changes. Some of them have to do with technology. Look what social media has done. Look how that has changed things. We've had people murdered over quotes, statements, being dissed on social media. You look at the way technology has changed the way we've done our job, and then there's issues there. People want to make sure we're not Big Brother, that we're not spying on people, that we're not abusing that, and we're not. We're using it to go after criminals. We're not trying to look into someone's window and see what they're doing. We don't do that. So with those new tools, there are also challenges to make sure people understand we're using them appropriately. There are checks and balances, and that we're only using it to keep them safe. But then you look at societal issues as well. And that's been throughout the history of policing. I mean, it wasn't that far back with the civil rights era. So many things happened there that damaged the relationship between the police and the community, especially certain communities that we're still dealing with today. We have people born today who may not have lived there, but they have family members who did. And they hear those stories. And that impacts people. We look, it could be an economic depression, and we've seen multiple depressions of various levels throughout my law enforcement career in my life. You look at social unrest, you look what happened with George Floyd, and there have been multiple instances of police brutality for a long time, right? But now it's on camera. Now people see it, and they watch an officer kneel on the neck of a man for like 9 minutes as he pleads for his mother and dies. When they see that officer, they don't see a patch for his department. They don't even see his face so much. They see the uniform. And then they equate that kind of conduct to everyone who wears a uniform. And that's hard to overcome. We've had incidents in Fort Worth, the Tatiana Jefferson. That was a tough time for us. Even through the trial for Aaron Dean, which isn't completely over because of appeals and things we're seeing, that it's like it rips off the scab of the wound and it's brand new again. That's hard to deal with. When we look at political division, I think we're as polarized politically as a country as I've ever seen. That spills into policing, spills into everything that we do. There are always going to be new challenges. There'll always be new hurdles we have to overcome. What I want the community here in Fort Worth to know is we're going to go through this together. We're going to find a way to get through it together. We won't always agree on everything. No two people do. But we find the common ground we have. We find a way to move forward. And together we'll get through these issues. And I believe we will be stronger and better on the backside because of what we've gone through. Sometimes you got to go through pain to get to the prize. I think we're always consistently going through some form of pain or trauma to get where we need to be. Makes me think of a quote from James Baldwin, and I may have to paraphrase slightly. He said, I imagine one of the reasons some people cling so stubbornly to their hates is because they sense once hate is gone, they'll be forced to deal with pain. So it's like the trauma that happens in our lives. Sometimes we use hate as a coping mechanism. We push down the trauma because we don't want to deal with it. And we use the hate to mask that and to lash out because of the feelings we have. It's destructive. It's hard. But I'll say in policing, something we have not done well is help officers deal with the trauma they see every single day. Mental and emotional wellness has a stigma around it that is so damaging to everybody in the country. And I think we saw after COVID, it's become even more of an issue. And, we'll have people study this for decades to try to determine what happened. Part of it is, the economic downturn that happened. Part of it is the fear people had about COVID. And part of it was isolation. We're social creatures. We're not meant to be isolated. Right. And we have a generation of kids who went through a significant amount of time when they were supposed to be in school and playing with their friends that they were isolated. There's a lot of trauma and pain that we're dealing with as a country. My hope is that we're able to find productive ways of dealing with it, reach out for resources when we need them, rather than fearing that stigma. Because if we do, we'll all be able to process what we need to process, reconcile the things that we need to reconcile, become restored, and become better in the process.
So what would you say to a person who, based off a lot of the things that you just mentioned, the events that, if you will say indirectly or directly have give the perception of law enforcement one way, what would you say to the young lady or the young man who, who's on the fence, like, do I get into law enforcement? What would you say to that person?
I'd say it would be the best decision they can make. That's what I'd say. The best way to change something is to become involved in it. How much more involved can you become than becoming part of the profession, part of the Fort Worth Police Department? What's frustrating for us in law enforcement, and I understand that there are many instances that we see in the news about conduct that an officer may have engaged in across the country that people don't like. What I wish people understand, as bad as that is, and I'm not trying to discount it in any way, shape, form, or fashion, for every one of those incidents, there are thousands and thousands of encounters that go so well, where officers show courage, compassion, treat people with dignity and respect, go out of their way to try to help other people. I would tell those who are on the fence, if you really want to have an opportunity every single day you go to work to do the right thing, to make the profession what it should be, to have a positive impact in the lives of complete strangers. If you have a heart for service, if you have a heart for helping, I can't think of a profession that gives you more opportunities to do just that than policing.
And to the other side of that, what do you say to the citizen or the community who, may not feel that, they have the best relationship with law enforcement, or who, don't know how to, if you will, lack of better words, reconcile, if you will? What would you say to them?
Give us a chance. Give us the opportunity to show you that we can earn your respect and earn your trust. I'm not saying that anyone can ever really forget either maybe a bad experience they had or a bad experience a family member had that they've heard about over and over again. But don't judge all of us over a specific instance. Don't judge all of us over maybe an interaction you had with one officer or saw on the news. Give us a chance. We will hold ourselves accountable if we don't do it the right way. But I know in my heart, if you give us a chance, you'll see the overwhelming majority of the time it's done the right way. I've got so many officers that go out there every single day and make me so proud because of the way they serve. I have citizens call me, stop me in the community, send me emails, texts, phone calls, everything. Say, I just want you to know what this officer did for me in my life. I've had multiple emails like that just this week. I had somebody stop me yesterday to talk about an officer that they have had an interaction with. I could not be more proud of the work that they do every single day. I could not be more proud to be their chief. They are the reason I'm able to come to work and do what I do every day, because I know I'm helping them serve the way that they do in the community. And it gives me strength. It gives me encouragement. I would ask those community members to give us a real chance, an open mind. And you know what? Let's sit down and have coffee. Let's just sit down and talk for a little bit. Find out that we actually do have more in common than we don't. And we all really want the same things in life. We are so much more similar than we are different. But it's hard to really make that connection when you keep people at a distance. But it's hard to hate up close.
Right.
You get to know somebody, you get up close and really get to know who they are as a person, regardless of what differences you do have. You're going to find it's a lot easier to understand that person, have some empathy for that person, and actually make a connection, make a relationship that can make a difference. One of the things we're trying right now through Bonsil Shokumbi, our new police monitor, is a mediation program. So say there's a low-level complaint. By that, I mean maybe an officer is complained on for being rude. Well, the normal process is the person can either contact the police monitor directly or contact our department, talk with internal affairs. We'll investigate it, determine if there were any policy violations or inappropriate conduct, and if there were, then the officer can be disciplined. This will be instead a mediation program where we bring those two parties together, sit them down like this, get them up close, and talk about it. I want that citizen to talk about how they felt, what that officer did or said, how it made them feel, and why it offended them. I want that officer to be able to talk about, hey, this is why I did what I did. These are the policies. This is what I felt when I encountered you. And by doing that, the hope is that there is a reconciliation there. Conversations are, especially critical, crucial, difficult conversations. If both parties are really willing to listen, not just speak, but listen, we're hoping that brings more trust, more cooperation, and understanding between our residents and the officers that are out there serving them every single day.
You know, you talk a lot about being proud. You know, as you sit in your seat, do you know that you have made your family, your parents proud of, you know, doing what you're doing as the ultimate public servant, but also honoring them for how they raised you?
I sure hope so. That's what they tell me. I'll be honest, every day at some point I feel like I'm failing because I feel like I'm not doing enough. I feel like I need to be doing more. I ask myself, if I made a difference at all, have I done anything good? And a lot of times I'll think about that. You know, my parents. I remember when I first went and told my parents that I was selected to chief, my mother pulled out her Bible and read from Esther. And basically she said, I believe God has chosen you for such a time as this. You are here for a reason. You're going to do good work. And I completely believe in you and your abilities. That's very encouraging. And I've frequently run scripture through my head. My wife is my strongest supporter. Every day she's encouraging me. Every day, just this morning, she told me how proud she was of me. My kids say the same thing, how proud they are of me. And that's definitely affirming. That helps me realize that at least to some people, I am helping in some way, doing my part to make sure our department's in the place it needs to be, our officers are in the place they need to be to get the job done. One of the things I'm most proud of, we're going to have some information coming out about this soon. We're creating a wellness unit in our department because I want, when an officer, if they show up to your house for any reason, they show up with the right mindset, the right heart. So we're talking about not just physical wellness, mental, emotional, social, financial, spiritual. It's a holistic wellness. We want to remove that stigma I mentioned before. We also want to improve physical health, where officers not only are able to do the job better, but the number one killer of police officers is heart disease. With the stress, the shift work, working midnights and having to eat a Whataburger every day unless you bring your own food, not even wanting to exercise because you're just spent every day when you come home from work. That's not good on the heart. The lifestyle is not conducive to a healthy cardiovascular system. Working on that, but it's that holistic wellness. So when officers go into the community, they are in a good place when they come to work. Not worried about their family. They're not worried about their finances. They are centered, they're grounded, and they are holistically well. If we can make that as successful as I know it can be, that's something I will be very, very proud of, because the fruits of that will be seen in the relationships we have with our community, the health of our officers, their long-term health, their long-term successful, rewarding careers. I want them to retire and live as long as they possibly can. I've seen far too many officers retire within a year, they have a heart attack and die. I don't want to see that anymore. So it's about setting something up, putting something in place that even after I'm gone, long after I'm gone, not only is continuing, but gets better and better and better.
That's good. Yeah. So what are you hopeful for not only Fort Worth, but as of the Fort Worth Police Department? What are you hopeful that will come about?
I hope we'll see more healing. Like I talked about before, in my position, I go to training and conferences at cities across the country. And some of the most helpful has been with they call them major city chiefs. We have a Major City Chiefs Association. So it's made up of like the 66 maybe largest cities in the country and a handful from Canada. And a lot of us are dealing with a lot of the same issues. When you have a large city, there are common things that happen. But the support that I see from our community, the support that I see from our city leaders in Fort Worth is unlike anything I've seen anywhere else across the country. We are in an incredible place in Fort Worth, not just literally an incredible place, but an incredible point in time. We can look at all the frustration, the hard times, the trauma, the things we're dealing with, and we can say, well, we tried. It's just not worth it, man. Or we can realize when you're at a place like that, but you have that support and that connection and relationship with the community, the opportunity for even more improvement is exponential. We have what we call in policing, and in most industries, best practices. What are the best practices in policing? And we have been accredited by the Texas Police Chiefs Association with having great policies. That's good. And I love that we follow best practices, but I want Fort PD to set best practices. I want people across the country to look at Fort and say, what are they doing there? Look at the great work they're doing in Fort Worth. Look how they're addressing violent crime. Look how they're addressing property crime. The numbers are going the way they want them to. And look how they're able to have connections with their communities and even some of the hardest times that our nation and our generation has faced. What are they doing in Fort Worth? Because that should be a best practice. That's what I want to see. And not to give Fort Worth PD any kind of glory, but to figure out what works best to be able to be innovative. You got to be afraid to fail. Just fail forward, learn from it, move on, and do it better next time. And if we're able to do that and we're able to set a standard like that where everyone else can take it and make it work in their own cities, the whole country's better. Somebody's got to take the lead. Somebody's got to be the first one to step out there and try things sometimes. Reasonable things. I'm not talking about careless or reckless. And then share that with everyone else. I want Fort Worth to be that beacon that others look to say, we want to be like that.
That's good. That's good. So 30 years from now, we're at Police Chief Neil Noakes' retirement party. What do you want your legacy to be, and how do you want to be remembered?
I've been asked that before. The truth is that's not up to me. Other people will decide what my legacy is. But I do believe we have, all of us, wherever we are going to leave a legacy whether we want it or not. What we can do is take advantage of every single opportunity we have to try to give people the information they need so that it is a positive legacy. They decide it's a positive legacy. I hope when people think about me, they think about faith, family, and friends. I hope they think of someone who's humble enough to know he does not have all the answers. Someone who wants to build relationships both in the department and in the community. Someone, although he is imperfect and made mistakes in his time as chief, every decision came from a good place. He was really trying to do what was right for everyone. A humble servant leader. I hope I can be remembered like that, and somebody who really cared, really tried to make a difference the best he possibly could and put others before himself. That's a very lofty goal, and I know with some I'll never attain that. Some because of my position, some they just may not like me as a person. I have to accept that too. But I just hope everybody knows I gave it my best shot.
That's good. That's good. Well, Chief, I know you're a busy man, but I just want to thank you again for sitting down and having this conversation. It was truly enlightening to me to not only learn a little bit more about you, but how you lead with your heart and try to get 1% better every day. So thank you again for your time.
Hey, my pleasure, brother. Thank you.
Appreciate it.